Everyone, I want to welcome you to the next in our edition of the kind of expert in learning series here with Forward. We are building out the top events to help startups, scale-ups, corporates, and climate folks everywhere, be that from high to low, advance your career in climate sustainability. If you haven't been a member with Forward very long, I highly recommend our new member call and our onboarding checklist. Going through that is probably the best way to get up to speed fast on exactly what we do. I'll share a video as well here of what is Forward, because we really are a bit of everything to everyone. We have the tech, talent, and capital to solve climate change, but not if it takes 10, 20, 30 years for the right folks to meet each other. And that's what we're doing with Forward, is that LinkedIn plus Meetup plus Tinder, so those right folks can meet each other and start to connect, collaborate, hire, find investors, find clients, etc. Again, getting up to speed, check out our new member calls and our new member onboarding checklist if you haven't done that yet. It'll probably 10x your results. You either get a lot out of or you get nothing out of Forward. And it's really a function of how deep you go and what you put into the ecosystem and the community. It comes back in spades. Today is one of our consulting series. So we've got Peter on. I won't even try to introduce him because I just jumble those up whenever I do introductions. So I'll give him a chance in a sec. But we work with Peter. Peter's been in the, as he said, headhunting and tech business for quite a while now. And he's one of our consulting partners with Forward's Climate Consulting Collective. We help startups and scale-ups with fundraising, growth, grants, hiring, branding, marketing, expansion. We help corporates with decarbonization, hiring, sustainability services, ESG. Essentially, we've taken this network and ecosystem that we have and the experts like Peter, who's going to share more on how you can implement some of this into your own company as well. We take them and work together with the top ones to help you advance your goals for climate sustainability. And that's really what we're here for today. You want to kick things into that first slide, Peter? Because today we're talking all things hiring and the blueprint. How do you start and scale that company up, your startup, from a startup to a scale up? Because it really comes so much down to team. I know that's something that we've struggled with a lot in the past, being a startup and volunteer-led organization, unfunded. But Peter's got experience across the board. I think it's time to hand things over to you now, Peter. And one last thing before that, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A questions at the end. Post your questions in the chat or in that Q&A little tab down at the bottom. Be sure to introduce yourself in the chat here. Sign up for those new member calls. And after this, check out some of the upcoming events that we have that could be valuable to you. But now I would pass things over to Peter because he's the reason you guys are here.
Okay, hey Matt, thanks a lot. So hi everybody, really pleased to have the opportunity to present this. So as Matt said, my name is Peter Wharton. I'm from the UK originally, but I've been in Switzerland now for about 36 years now. And my background is I used to work in tech. I was in product management. I was in product marketing. I moved into management, and I got up to VP level for some American and then some European companies in the kind of product management, marketing space, and then sales as well. And I started my recruitment company about 8 years ago. Antal is actually a franchise organization, so you'll see lots of Antal offices around the world. But it's here it's my business, and so what we do is we work with scale up and mid-size tech companies here in Switzerland, but also across Europe and also in the US, either working for European companies in the US or also some American companies. And most of the companies we work with are in the SaaS AI side, and increasingly, in fact, my last 4 or 5 clients have been in either clean tech or sustainability tech. So there's obviously a big move in that area to the sustainability type businesses. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll gladly connect with you. And it'd be good to learn a little bit about where you are. So here we're going to be talking about how really to plan for hiring for companies in the clean tech and sustainability space. So the challenges that clean tech and sustainability tech companies have, obviously there's a lot of similarities to tech in general, such as, the primary cause of failure, it's around poor execution of business plans, or the product not having a great market fit. Cash shortage, cash management is absolutely key, but also not really seeing what the competition's doing and learning from them. And a lot of these, really all of these can be avoided if you have good teams in place. If you don't have a good team in place, then all of these problems are more are going to happen. So in terms of being able to execute well, the company has to have very strong foundations that need to be planned from the beginning. You have to have validated or strong business models. Cash flow management, obviously key. But really, especially in the early years, you've got to hire the right people at the right time, because it has such a big impact on the future of the company. Otherwise, there are other things around the accelerating climate crisis. There's more and more demand for scalable clean tech solutions, but with that comes the financial pressure, and also a lot of question about subsidies and if they will continue. So obviously having a strong business plan and being economically viable is really, really very, very important. So this is kind of
at that early stage, especially. So the timeline, I'm glad that you have that here. I want to dive a little deeper into it as well. So when does that startup, I guess you're probably going to dive into this as well, but culture eats execution and strategy for breakfast. Don't remember who said it, but it is so true. It is the people. And I think that's probably what you're about to get into with year one. So I don't want to steal the thunder too much, other than just to say he really knows what he is talking about. If you have a startup, all startups fail for one of two reasons. Either you run out of money because you couldn't find investors or clients fast enough, or the co-founders essentially divorce each other and they don't want to work together as a team, and the team falls apart. It's either team or it's money. And today we're talking team. And to do that, back to you, Peter.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. It's we'll cover it. You're right. We'll cover it as we go on, but really from the early days. So at a very high level, and we'll go into more detail of each of these steps. So I've actually put this as year one, year two, year three. It's really more phase one, phase two, because a company can spend maybe a couple of years in the very early stages, and then bypass one phase to another in 6 months. But putting by year is actually not a bad thing. So really starting with the building the foundation and the core team, and it's mostly on the technical side. Year two, it's about proving the product viability and building the team to do that. Year three, it's about go to market and starting to create business revenue and starting to scale. Year four, or the phase four, it's really managing rapid growth, which is probably one of the hardest phases of any company as it matures. And then year five, it's about really expanding beyond the initial market. Usually means expanding internationally, and depending on the type of product, vertically expanding at different stages of the product production, or maybe adding services and different features.
Said another way, pre-seed to seed to Series A. And Series A is really starting in that fourth, fifth year where it really is building up. And how do you get there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So year one, or phase one, it's really about building a strong foundation. So the goal is, as I said, it's to build the core product, and then get some early funding, or even find some preliminary customers even before the product is finished. So it's about the early decisions about how the company's going to grow are obviously very, very important, especially when you're talking to investors. But when you build the business plans, you need to build a talent strategy around this. So key considerations at this stage, obviously, you're building your key team. So you have your co-founders bringing in the initial engineers, and it's probably going to be people with a lot of very focused, specialized experience, obviously in the domain of the company. Here we sort of start about mission. So defining a mission, it's really important, because in the first few stages of a startup or scale up, candidates aren't going to be attracted to a company for the compensation, because it's going to be low. So they really must believe in the vision, and the mission of the company, because you want people that are going to give everything for little reward, at least in the early days. Because of the clean tech and sustainability side, you're going to have to bring in some experience in terms of regulatory and compliance. It's not going to be a full-time role, but at least have access to that knowledge within the company as you build out your product. And at this stage, in terms of the hiring sources, it's definitely not going to be with recruiters. It's through people leveraging their own networks, advisors they bring into the companies and the universities, especially with engineering. Very, very minimal HR infrastructure. And some of the critical roles at this stage, you're going to have to bring in a finance director or CFO, and they'll have multiple hats. So in terms of, obviously it's going to be finance, but also it'll be HR, it'll also be operations to a certain extent.
You think already in year one, so already in that pre-seed stage?
Yeah, it's not necessarily the CFO, but you need somebody who can take that responsibility, because you're still going to have to have expenses to manage.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have somebody who understands the finances. It can be one of the founders as well, but having financial knowledge there, and it can even be a part-time role, but you really need to have that from the beginning. The CTO leadership,
yeah,
it's going to be probably from the founders, and as I mentioned before, access to a regulatory consultant.
And once you need that outsourced help, or once you do want to offload this from the founders or the team, we do have outsourced CFO services as well with Forward. I'll share a little bit more. Yeah. So you can certainly reach out for support, because I certainly know I don't like doing finance.
Yeah, that makes two of us. Okay. So now on to year two. So really, this is really having proof of concept. It's proven the technology, and it's a state where you need to start expanding the team to bring the product to market. So it's about providing validation in a lab, depending on where you are, maybe even having a pilots in potential clients. And it's going to be an area where you're going to start, obviously, looking to finance that as well, because if you're going to bring in, expand the R&D team, you're going to have to pay for it. So here you need to align your talent strategy. Obviously, on the technology side, you need to have that validated. And again, you're really still managing with the absolute minimal resources, even when some money starts coming in. And this is one of the biggest areas of error that I see with companies, is the moment money comes in, everybody gets excited. They go and recruit a bunch of people, which can be good for people like myself, but often these people are just sat around not doing anything. So and then get laid off, and then the money's spent. So got to be so careful with the talent strategy. Depending on the product, so your key considerations are going to be about complementing the skills of the co-founders and the very initial people involved. If you bring in scientists and engineers and they can wear multiple hats across different skills, so much the better, because it's a much more effective model. You're going to have people that can work for speed, because you want to get the product finished as quickly as possible and out there. And this is really when you start developing the employer brand. So really establish, a compelling mission, a mission statement, and start to articulate the values of the company. Because, as I mentioned before, most employees at this stage are going to be interested in the company and what it stands for and what it's trying to achieve, more than the compensation.
When does it make sense to start formalizing those company cultures and values, so that it's not just a fancy poster on the wall that everyone has and is kind of cliche?
Well, well, it should never be that anyway. And it's really something that grows, because when you're starting out, it can be quite small. What was it Google had, I think, at the beginning was no evil or something like that. So it's something that gets flushed out over time. But it probably start with a couple of lines in terms of the mission and vision. As employees start coming in, then it will expand a bit more, and you have the mission, vision, purpose, and then it starts being flushed out. But when you start bringing in more people, you need to have a compelling statement of where the company is going. So in this second phase, in terms of product validation, obviously start fleshing out the R&D team. Again, it depends on the product that you're bringing out, but obviously lab technicians, test engineers, and ideally people who can wear multiple hats.
Let's stick with an example. Let's have a product. So let's say that you are building out next generation solar cells, just to have something that's easy and tangible for most people.
Yeah.
Next generation solar cells. Now, typical year 2, you're proving out the technology. You're in that early TRL 4 or 5 stage and trying to finalize things for production. When do you start bringing people on board? When do you really start to think about it? Let's try to keep it as tangible as possible, because otherwise it can get a little heavy and theoretical for doers and for people who are really in the trenches. How do you think about this? When is it time to start hiring? Is it when you have the money? Is it what, from your experience?
Well, you need to really look at your product roadmap, and you build your development timeline around the product roadmap. And so you're going to have your key milestones in terms of development, and that's really going to drive your, assuming you have the money, that's going to drive the acquisition of talent, because you're going to have to you'll have to bring in certain people with expertise at certain times to be able to achieve the product roadmap goals, to bring the product out. So I can't give an exact example for your example, but it's really built on the plans and the development, and when different milestones are being hit, and you need to bring in resources that you don't have the skill sets or the bandwidth to be able to hit the timelines.
How do you do that if you don't have those skill sets? How do you prepare ahead of time and then be able to hire or find those type of people? Because I imagine a lot of this is pretty deep tech. Maybe your CTO is the one who.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the CTO is the one that will define that, because the CTO is the one that will understand the platform, or will define the platform, and so they will know what skill sets are required then. But hopefully it'll be somebody who's going to work with the engineers, because engineers can have good ideas as well, and they'll be able to contribute to the assessment of what's required at different times. So hopefully the companies are going to be really quite inclusive, with and listening to the specialists that are already on the team. And there's also going to be, most companies will have external advisors as well, and often the advisors, they'll come in for shares, not necessarily kind of remuneration. And again, people, the companies can tap into their expertise to advise them too. So hopefully, companies will bring in the right advisors at the right moment too.
And if you're lucky, you can bring in advisors that are also angel investors, where before they get some advisory shares, they're putting some capital into the company itself.
Oh, and that's the ideal scenario for sure. But obviously, they have to have the right expertise to do that. Okay, no, great question. Thanks, Matt. So here also, I've kind of pinpointed for HR. So when you start expanding the team, bringing on people, it's complicated. You've got to obviously go out and find people, maybe through advertising, definitely through internal resources, but you still need to interview, bring people on board, manage contracts, and so on. So it's around this time when an HR role should be brought in. Now, that it can be an external consultant if there's money there. It can be a part-time, which is often a good solution initially, or a fractional manager. And for those that don't know what that is, a fractional manager, it's basically it's a more of a current day term for intermittent or temporary. A temporary manager, so they're coming for a certain amount of time, and then a full-time person will be hired. But it's more an intermediate role, and depending on how much time or how senior, it really depends on the company, what they're hiring, and what support is required. There's not a one-size-fits-all. And then the last thing I put here is product management. So this may not be a full-time role then, and often it's something at this stage which is assumed by engineering. But any company that doesn't have a product management responsibility within the company that will work or that will understand the market needs and be able to work with potential customers to make sure that their requirements are built into the product specifications and development is absolutely critical, because this is one of the areas that a lot of companies fail on, is that the products will be developed by engineers in a silo, and they come out with a fantastic product that doesn't fit the market need, and either competitors do it better or there's just not interest. So bringing in a product management responsibility, even if it's with an engineer, is is also very important at this stage.
Is this something you need from day one? This is one of the challenges I see. So we're both based here in Switzerland, and it's mostly university spin-outs, so the startups that are here. And a lot of university spin-outs are the two techies that are a bit nerdy and have developed something awesome and have no idea how to sell it or what customers want, but know that there's something awesome, should probably be a great product in business. When is it really time to bring someone in, and does that person need to be a founder? Can that person be one of the early employees? How do you think about and advise companies here?
Yeah, typically it's not year one unless one of the founders happens to have that skill set anyway. It's really in the second phase, once the product is starting to be prepared for market. Not all engineers, or most engineers, are not don't have the capability to be good product management, because it's really about interacting with customers and looking to understand what's needed rather than what can be developed. Ideally you should have a product management responsibility at the beginning, but it's usually the founders that probably have that, even if they are nerdy. They've identified that side. Advisors can help a lot in the early stages as well, but you need to have it assigned once the roadmaps are being built, reviewed. You've got to constantly be checking that the assumptions about the product are aligned with what the market requires. Not necessarily what they want, because sometimes people don't really know what they want, but being able to identify the needs in the marketplace. Okay, so year 3, this is, or phase 3. So this is really when it starts getting to be, I guess, a more viable interest, a business. So it's about go to market. It's about starting to drive to bring in revenue and starting to scale the operations side. So it's really the transition. The goal is really to go from an R&D setup to, I say pre-commercial here, it's probably more early commercial stage. And if there's manufacturing involved, obviously it's to start producing the product. And this is when, in terms of the organizational side, as the team expands, like IT systems need to be put in place so that there is more structure. Things aren't just done on spreadsheets, and getting ready for growth. And this is quite a hard phase for founders, because this is when the management team needs to get wider and broader. And founders can be great drivers for a business, very passionate, and some will always be very, very heavily involved. But there's also there needs to be acceptance that there are some other people that need to be brought into the management team who can do things better. So this is when there's a broader management side, and there's a lot more strategic hiring, looking at the business plan and how things expand and bringing in leadership. So this can be quite a tough time for founders, as they need to relinquish some of the control of their company as well.
How often do you see founders able to transition to those larger and later stage, more managerial roles? I know sometimes founders need to be or want to be replaced, find someone else as CEO, or bring in external management or leadership support. Do you have any advice or thoughts for founders and scale-ups that are kind of considering this conundrum?
Yeah. So I've seen, it worked very well with founders being involved. Actually, when I was a product manager, my first product management job was with Logitech, and Logitech was a startup at that stage. And this was a case where the founder, Daniel Burrell, he had the aptitude to really be with a company for many, many years and drive it to be a multi-billion-dollar business. And the reason why he did well was that even though he was an engineer by trade, he was always learning. He was talking to people and he was learning about the business side. Very, very curious guy, and was able to adapt. And he knew that for certain things he had to bring in the right business. Another company I've worked with here in Geneva, I won't name the company but the founder really kept in control, and found it very difficult to let the management team assume the responsibilities that they would. And they were very successful, or they still are. But this person, even when the company was 200 people and they were recruiting like 50, 60 people a year, he would interview everybody and not let go. And in the end, the investors replaced him because it started to hamper the growth of the company, because everything had to go through this guy. So, I've seen it work in different ways. A lot of it is really down to the aptitude of the founder, but also their willingness to learn, if they have an engineering background, to really look at, learn about business. There's so many good case studies out there, and for them to be able to adapt, to assume that role too.
How do you start to systematize culture so that is possible and hiring doesn't have to be through a bottleneck? And when is it time for the founders, the co-founders, to stop being the ones leading those interviewing and hiring processes?
Yeah, so year 3 is definitely that time.
How many people is that normally?
I'm sorry?
How many people is that? How large of a team size, to give some context?
Yeah, I'd say from probably from about 35, 40 people upwards.
Okay. Makes sense once you can't really know everyone's kids and what sports they play and seeing them on a frequent basis every day.
But it depends on the founder and their role as well. Because if one of the founders is responsible for sales, and he or she effectively becomes the CRO, then they will always be involved in sales, but they won't be interviewing everybody. So yeah, year 3 is really when you start bringing in, you start expanding further the middle management, putting in layers, and then you need to trust your management team, at least depending on the role. Obviously, if it's for senior roles within the company, then obviously the founders will still need to be involved for that, but not for every single hire, for sure. So in this year, if manufacturing is involved, then obviously you need to bring in people with manufacturing and supply chain experience. This is an area where full-time salespeople need to get involved as well. It's really going to be more about business development. So having people that can understand the industry. They don't necessarily need to be experts in the industry, but can understand the product. But they know how to knock on doors, contact key stakeholders for customers if it's a B2B product. If it's a more of a consumer-based product, that's it's a different kind of sale, but it's usually working with partners. But really kind of building, and it's really the most important thing in my opinion at this stage for salespeople is, and you're not going to have many anyway, but it's more about attitude and the ability to be very resilient and acquire customers through persistence. It's really this is a stage where it's really about doing everything to bring customers on board. Here, in terms of the culture side, we've mentioned this many times, but it's really going, and this is really where you set probably more of the blueprint for the coming 10 years in terms of defining what the company stands for, what are its core values. And it's also a stage where, because you're going to have more and more people, it's to implement HR processes like performance reviews as well. Because it's important in terms of retaining, but also assessing if you have the right people in the job at the right time. And the last one, it's around diversity inclusion. For me, I've worked in scale-up companies before. I recruit for scale-ups. The more diverse the employees in a company, the more creative and usually the higher performing is the company, rather than having very homogenous employees. To me, and it's part of the culture, and it's part of the company culture. It's very, very key. The typical roles here at this stage is, start bringing in some senior management. And again, as we mentioned before, about founders needing to let go a little bit. So VP of engineering or head of product. The difference between the two is the head of product would also manage product management as well. And I see more and more companies having this as a joint role, like a head of product. About 20 years ago, product management used to be under marketing. Now it's really more of an engineering-related role, and it seems to be a lot better to have the product management and engineering working in the same team, so that it doesn't become siloed. If it's manufacturing, you really need to get strong skill sets in terms of being able to support the manufacturing teams, whether it be internal, probably it's going to be external manufacturing at this stage. Business development leads, and bringing in a sales engineer if it's a very complicated product. You're going to have to start looking at the marketing side, and how this can be people that are, you probably want to have a full-time marketing person. We'll probably have to work with agencies a lot, just because people are expensive. But you really need to. This is where you need to establish a good, strong brand for the company and build upon that. And this is
I'm going to jump in here quick as well. So for everyone, while you're listening, share a little bit more about you. Who here are startups and scale ups? Are you in B2B, B2C? Are you building hardware or software solutions? Just so we have more context and insights into you and can tailor the last part of the presentation specifically to attendees and what you guys need the most help with. Post info about yourselves, your questions, what you're looking for, so we can really maximize the value for you. And continue scaling, Peter.
Okay, great. No, I'd love to understand what kind of companies people are working on here. And then the last one, it's about people operations, talent partner. HR is largely, reports into the initial years into the CFO. But this is a time when you have to have a full-time HR manager involved, really to manage the growth of the teams, and also start doing some talent acquisition, and this is also a time when companies like myself get involved when a company just doesn't have the resources to be able to recruit everybody through internally, either through LinkedIn ads or through their network, because companies that I've worked with can be like, say, 35, 40 people, and then they'll hire exactly the same number of people again in the next 12 months, and that's a lot of work. And you've got to be so careful to always bring in the right people and good people. So the HR role at this stage, very, very important. So year 4, phase 4, it's all about market expansion. You've got a proven product, you've got a proven business case, you've got experience in bringing in some revenue, and it's really now about expanding and maintaining the momentum of the company as it's moving on. So operations need to be scaled up. The idea is that in the business plan is to hit major commercial milestones. So it can be number of customers, it can be revenue, and this is also an area in terms of preparing for more substantial funding to really drive that growth. And engineering will always be a big part of the funding, but this is also where you see a lot more investment in sales, in bringing more and more salespeople on board, and different roles within sales, and marketing
Basically,
as well.
You got product market fit at this point. Now it's time to get out there and sell the dog food to everybody who's got the dogs.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Good analogy. So, but another key part of that is is obviously planning, and then executing to plan, and having the metrics as you go along to ensure that you're hitting the right milestones and you're doing things right. So middle management, you start bringing in more and more the sales director, head of roles. The sales side, as I mentioned, really key. So the difference between sales and customer success management. So sales is really about acquiring new businesses, but at a certain point, you're going to want to hand off. Again, this is more for B2B business, customers to the customer success manager. So what they do is that they manage existing customers, and they're always looking, obviously, to retain them, but also can they upsell? Are there different departments in the companies they sell to that would also be interested in grow the business? Because good business development people are usually not great at managing long-term relationships with clients. And so
this is somewhere I want to jump in as well. So there's a theory, I think it's called Jacob's theory, and it's why managers are generally viewed as incompetent in terms of the roles that they're in. And the theory basically is how hiring and how promotions work. You get promoted for doing your job well. So if you're a salesperson, for instance, and you're really great at selling, you become suddenly the head of a sales team, and then the head of a larger sales region, and then head of sales. But you were great at sales. You weren't great at leading people or organizing and running teams. So you get promoted until the point where you're no longer to be able to be promoted anymore because you're no longer really good at the new job that you have. You got promoted out of what you were great at. How much do you see this and believe in that? And how important is that for not hiring just purely internally, but bringing in external talent of people who have hit these types of milestones and had these types of results so that you can avoid those challenges of managers getting promoted to the point where they're no longer really promotable?
No, for sure. I mean, it's definitely a common problem. I mean, if you promote internally for that kind of role, then you should be assessing more than just somebody hitting the targets. You know, in terms of how they behave, you know, how they work within the team. Are they team spirited? And you know, if you assess someone, you can usually get a fee. You should be able to understand, are they going to make a good manager? Because some of the best sales guys make very, very good careers by just being sales guys, you know, and they just move to you know, to selling more and more, and can earn very well. If you recruit from outside, then obviously you have you know, people should be able to prove their experience as a sales manager and what they've achieved, for sure. No, it is a common problem, but it also depends on the top management being able to assess the internal employees as well. And that's also going back to one of the earlier point about having review processes in place. So you know, a lot of the onus would be on the HR manager and also the executive team. You're also going to bring in marketing and product marketing. So marketing, it's more around, obviously, it's the branding, it's the communication side, website. It can be about demand generation and pipeline management, whereas a product marketing is about the messaging and the story and being able to engage with customers. You know, and you know, with these years, you know, these 5 years, it's not like you go from 1 year and then next year all of a sudden you hire these people. It's kind of a process where they kind of flow in. But yeah, by this stage, you know, you need to have set up a good size, you know, the right sort of experience necessary within marketing and product marketing. In terms of the recruiting infrastructure, you know, this is where again things need to stop being managed on spreadsheets. An ATS system. So this is an applicant tracking system. So, you know, having multiple employees start, you need to be able to track it and maintain the records in a very structured way. And you need to have a good interview process. One of the biggest challenges any company has now is that the interview process can be delayed through people's availability. And so many candidates.
How long does a typical interviewing process take? How much time is this from we need to fill this role now to this role actually being filled? What does that process look like? How long does it typically take?
That's a good, great question. So when I recruit for companies, usually I start providing candidates within 3 to 4 weeks. So sometimes it can be before, but it depends on people's availability after I've done my interviewing and selection process. And I think this is what would be the first round if a company does it themselves. Then the next round will be usually, or ideally, the chosen candidates will have the first 2 or 3 interviews within the first 2 weeks after the candidates have been, you know, selected to be interviewed. Part of the process as well should be a case study, especially for sales and marketing and product management roles. But also I see that for engineering roles as well, where a problem is given or a case study and the company needs to present, and that's usually right at the end. also for the final list of candidates, there's usually psychometric testing about judging the what kind of person is being brought in, because that can be important for the team balance. So if we say 3 weeks for candidates to be identified and then presented, 2 weeks for the first maybe 3 interviews. Usually it's going to be HR, the hiring manager, and maybe a senior manager or a peer. The next week would be a case study, psychometric testing. So it can take about 2 months from the start to actually making an offer and an offer being accepted, because there's a negotiation time, if it's well run, if the process is well run.
What's the average? Yeah, what's the average look like? Companies do it themselves.
It's about the same. It's about the same, because often when companies recruit internally and it's not through their network, they'll put ads in LinkedIn, and this can take. So a company could get maybe 200-300 CVs, and maybe 5% will be valid. So and then they have to be have that initial. So I would say that from the time a search starts to the time that somebody is offered a role, it probably averages 6 to 8 weeks if it's a well planned process. I've managed it in a month, but that was kind of exceptional. But it has happened. Sometimes it can take 3 to 4 months, and that's when candidates drop out. They either drop out because they're not impressed with the company, they kept waiting, or competitors come in and poach them.
Neither of which are good for the company. So we're in year 4. What if we had to accelerate year 5 a little bit? So we've got some time at the end for questions as well. Take us through accelerated scaling.
Okay. So anyway, here, director level hires, sales and marketing teams, critical, recruiters, finance. Okay, then lastly, this is internationalization, vertical expansion, going into different markets, and really preparing for major financial rounds or IPO and long-term success. And really, it's just growing internationally. So a lot of international hiring. There are a lot of complexities inside of this, because most companies won't open up an office in every single country. So you work through things such as employers of record. Because the company becomes quite large and the revenues targets are much higher, this is when you start bringing in more experienced leadership, really, very seasoned executives to manage that side. Retention often is a problem this side. Early hires, the roles have outgrown them, and so people need to start being replaced. Either people leave or they need to be replaced. And then obviously, again, it's all around the company culture and the sustainable goals. And so
sorry, go ahead.
So typical key roles at this stage, chief commercial officer or chief revenue officer. You have regional management. So, if you're expanding to different continents, you need to start setting up things there. Senior program managers and operational leaders. And here you start having, you expand the HR team as well. So you've HR business professionals.
When does it make sense to handle this in-house versus working on hiring or working with a headhunter or a talent provider like you? When do companies typically start to make this transition?
So I tend to start working with companies in year 3. So when they're starting to go to market, because you need to start bringing in talent that can't really be done through networking, and continue through this. As you get to year 5, companies will bring in more and more talent acquisition professionals, and so the volume of work with recruiters is less. But there's always going to be specialized roles that you can't hire through internal resources, and often for executive roles, which I do quite a lot of, it's often confidential searches as well. And again, you don't use internal people. So there's less and less reliance as the company becomes more mature, but most companies will always have certain roles that they outsource to recruitment consultancies.
Are they confidential because they're replacing someone, or someone on the leadership team isn't cut up to snuff and they need to bring in someone else?
Yeah, it can be both. But sometimes, I recently recruited a chief product officer for a German company, and somebody was moving out of the role and they wanted to replace that person, but they didn't want the employees to know, because when top management starts changing, it can lead to uncertainty within a company. And people get nervous, and they didn't want their employees to have that. They wanted to have a clean break, so saying, okay, this person's actually moving into another role, but we brought in this person. And so often it's just about maintaining a good, a good atmosphere in the company, not getting people worried for no reason as well. So that can be, but sometimes it is because somebody's a poor manager and they need to be replaced. That does happen too. Okay. So that's it. I hope that was useful. Be interesting to have your thoughts on any if there's any specific questions or thoughts, or even any views on the different phases and the actions.
I would say hiring for talent versus culture fit. How do you think about that? And how does that change potentially over time?
You need to do both. You need to have the right culture fit with the right talent.
And what if you have to compromise on one or the other? Which is more critical in your opinion?
You can't, because I mean, you need to have the right experience. You need to have the right experience. Depends on the role, but you need to have the right experience, because especially as the company's growing, you're not going to have that many resources, so each role is critical. So you need to have somebody who can clearly has the experience to do the job, but then you need to have somebody who's going to fit and not be disruptive in the company as well. So usually you should wait until you have the right person, with the right culture fit and the right personality for the company before you hire that person. But you still need to have somebody with the right skill sets that's going to achieve that. You can always get somebody part-time, like intermittent, or externally, until you have that right person on board. But you need to have both. You can't say one or the other. The worst thing you can do is bring in somebody that's an absolute rock star at what they do, and they poison the environment. It affects everybody, and the talent leaves for sure.
Yeah.
But you can't be carrying people just because they're a good fit for the company.
That is a very common culture and trope and problem with companies, a la Uber and Elon and other places. There is that. Yeah, you certainly need balance, but you also don't want to destroy your team in the process of growth at all costs, so to speak. Mind going to the next slide now while we start to wrap things up?
Okay, I think I'm there now. This one, yes.
Yeah. And again, folks, this was brought to you by our consulting arm, so our Climate Consulting Collective. We help startups and scale-ups with hiring, recruiting, internationalization, fundraising, growth. We work with corporates on decarbonization, ESG, reporting and services, carbon footprinting and accounting. If you need help with growing or scaling or advancing your climate mission for your organization, feel free to reach out. It's just forward.earth. We work with Peter. He's, as you can tell, a pro, very deep into the space as well. And specifically, what regions are you most focused on? I know you're very strong on the deep tech and clean tech side, which is great if you need to hire people with those, essentially the super hard to find ones. But where's your network the best, and how do you think about recruiting or hiring internationally as well?
Yeah, so most of my business is in Central and Northern Europe. So I have very strong networks in the Netherlands, Germany, obviously Switzerland, France, really Belgium, Netherlands, Benelux, and Scandinavia. That's where the majority of my business is. But I do have partners that I work with in Southern Europe as well. So I have that region covered. But I personally work more within Central and Northern Europe. I also do a lot in the US as well. So I recruit for European companies in the US, but I have a couple of American clients where I actually recruit American employees for American clients too. So I have a pretty strong network there.
And we have global networks as well for hiring if you're looking for Asia, Southeast Asia, South America, etc. If you need support with your mission, be sure to reach out at our consulting arm and check our upcoming online events. RSVP to a couple. There's new member calls. If you haven't attended, it's one of the best ways to meet your cohort, get connected with some folks, and really start to find where you can find value with Forward, be that the VC databases, connecting to investors or other startups, finding consultants or support, landing clients, partners, promotions, building your network, finding a job, decarbonizing your company. Everyone is here in the ecosystem. It's really about finding them. And we know it's a bit of a complicated can of worms of how to do that. We've put together a pro tips guide on how to use the member directory to access the incredible members. So if you're a startup seeking distribution partners in South America, or you're a corporate seeking decarbonization support in Southeast Asia, et cetera, you can find the types of folks that you're looking for just by getting creative with the filters. And if you need any partnership or support with advancing what you're doing, then be sure to reach out to us and Forward.